Hello and welcome back to Newbie Monday Part 2. In Part 1 we went through the general classes. If you're a general player, like getting close and brawly, or if you like to have a tank that has a lot of capability, and we also advise you not to go down certain routes. Now in Part 2 we're going to explain why that's a bad decision. Although I did brush on it in Part 1, I'll explain why the scouts are much harder to play for a new player. It might be the thing for you, but I'll go through that. And in Part 3 we'll go through things like artillery and TDs. So what is a scout? Well, in World of Tanks, a scout is a tank that has usually a worse gun than available for its tier group, or at least its battle group. And I have to explain something about the matchmaking now. Before recent patches, you used to be able to get in a lot of battles depending on the tank, but they fixed it so that generally speaking, you will always fight tanks that are within 2 tiers of yours. So if you're in a tier 5 tank, you'll go against tier 7s, or up to tier 7s, and you'll go down to tier 3s. But it's rare. You normally fight 6s, 5s, and 4s, right? So the average battle is like that. However, you get in a scout tank and that goes out the window. You get in a tier 4 scout tank, you're going to be seeing tier 9s, 8s and 9s, right? You get a tier 5 scout tank, you will see any tank. Okay, so it's a lot harder just purely from that respect. You've got a lot more enemies to understand and recognize. You've got the heavy tanks to see and respect. So if you meet a mouse in your first game, you're like, what is that? Try to shoot it, pling, uh-oh, can't hurt it, boom, you're dead. What? Now if you're in a normal medium tank at tier 5, you only have to learn up to tier 7 until you get through that to 6. So it's a much nicer progression as you're going up the tech tree. So that's one of the good reasons to avoid the light tanks. And if you still want to go for light tanks, the other hard thing is that you don't get XP from hurting things because you don't have a good enough gun, unless you get all the way to the chaffee, but you won't get there unless you're already pretty decent, right? Because the better you do in battles, the more XP you get, the more silver you get, the more silver and XP you get, the faster you go through the tech tree. Simple as that. So, so if you have premium, is still 200 experience plus 50% is still 300 experience. You're still progressing incredibly slowly. If you can do the damage, you're going to get a lot more experience and a lot more silver to buy the stuff. So it's a lot easier to go through a combat route than it is scouting. The way you get your XP from scouting is by sitting in a bush somewhere. I'm going to go layman's term for people who know. You sit in a bush somewhere and you light up the enemies. Basically what that means is that you use your binoculars and your radio set. You see enemy tanks, you tell your teammates damage the enemy tanks beyond what they could normally see, you gain half of the experience points for that damage. Sweet! Free experience. And you don't even need to fire a shot, so you get less silver spent, right? But you rely on your teammates even more so than in a normal battle. In a normal battle, you expect your teammates to be with you and support you in combat, but at least you can defend yourself. As a scout, you rely 100% on your teammates, like completely and utterly on your teammates. And if your teammates aren't good, then, well, you're fucked. So scout tanks are really hard to play. You need to know and be able to read the map, the positions of the enemy. You need to know where to go. You've got to be there early. There's other ways of scouting too. You don't just have to sit in the bush. You could do the usual drive near the enemy, see a few of them and get the hell out of there. And they're lit up for a few seconds. That allows your artillery and your heavy tanks to shoot them from a distance. And then you can do it again. That obviously has a bit of risk because if you get seen and shot, you're dead. So light tanks are really specialized for your style of play. If your style of play is like that and you really like that and that sounds amazing to you, you sir have balls of steel, or you have rock solid tits if you're a lady, because that is just cool. Really, you really do have balls of steel, and that's it. That's it really with light scouts. You will have a much harder time than everyone else. So if you don't want that, there's other tanks you can get. If you're not really taking the fancy of having a brawler or a medium-ish tank, there are other tanks like the TDs. Now, TDs play a bit differently to Actually, no, I won't go through TDs. TDs are the next part. The French tanks. Okay. Here's my analogy of the French tanks. If you don't mind watching your teammates die and seeing your entire team kicking the shit out of each other until both your team and their team is crippled, then spring into the action, kill everything, and fudge off again to reload, then the French tanks are for you. Then the French tanks are for you. If you're Mr. I like hiding in the shadows, and when the enemy are least expecting, I'm going to jump out, blow them up, and run away again, and don't give a shit about your teammates, then the French are for you. Basically, what they have is something called an autoloader. And I'm talking about the late tier French. I'll go about why the French are a bit unique in a minute. But the higher tier French tanks have something called an autoloader, where they basically sit back out of the fight for most of the battle. Then when the battle is starting to turn, or there's an enemy that's not looking the right way, you pop out, take a few shots at him, and get back behind cover. And you can do that because of something called an autoloader. That you have, let's say, 6 shells in your chamber. Once you fire them, then you have to reload for like a minute. So for that minute, you're useless. But during the time when you have 6 shells in your autoloader, you are amazingly deadly. But you also have absolutely no armor. So anything looks at you, you will blow up. So a VK2801, like I said earlier, with a dirt cannon that explodes into you, you will die. 2 of them shells into you, you are dead. So that's why that tank is getting taken more and more recently. But the AMXs, as they're called, the French tanks, are actually really good. Don't let me think that they're bad. The style is just very hard. I would actually say it has one of the highest skill ceilings, because you have to know when to attack, when to do this, when to do that, blah, 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 blah. If you can't read when to do it, you'll just die a lot. A lot of people I know who tried the French light tanks go forward, charge in there with autoloader, go bang, bang, boom, they die. Whoa, these tanks are shit. But then in the hands of a really good player, they are freaking amazing. You see that IS-3 in front of you, and it takes a shot at you. You come out, take a shot at him. And then all of a sudden, you just go bang, 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 bang. You lose all your HP. You're on fire. Your ammo rack's hit. You're like, what the hell just happened there? And an AMX 12-ton just drove around the corner, unloaded into you, and then buggered off again. What? And now you're screwed. Your engine is damaged. You're on fire. Your bloody ammo rack's gone. And you're like, great. And then the IS-3 comes around and finishes you off. Great. Damn it. Frack. But the French aren't all fun and games. Before the French autoloaders, which I'll show you, are here. The AMX 12-ton and the the AMX M445. Actually, I don't even think this one has the autoload until the final gun. But basically, these 2 tanks get the autoloaders. Before these are a world of pain. And I'll explain why. The D1 is okay for a tier 2, I guess. It's tough, slow, poor gun. The D2 for a tier 3, tough, slow with a poor gun. The B1, tough, slow with a poor gun. I don't know if you see a pattern here, guys. Actually, the B1's not that slow, just has a slow top speed. The BDR G1B. Now, this is an interesting vehicle. Have a look at it. It's fucking ugly. Right? It has no armor, it's really slow, has a tall profile, but has a decent gun. Okay? The ARL 44 has good front armor, no armor on the turret, very good gun, but has a super high profile. It's so hard to play. It has a good gun. It has a good gun. Or as Wargaming says, it is high penetration. It's got a good gun. It's hard to play it. All the BDR and ARL, they have a high profile, low armor for anyone who knows where to shoot. As long as you don't shoot the ARL on the front plate, it's Swiss cheese. They're so hard to grind through. The reward is worth it if you like the style I described beforehand. If you like assassinating, fast-moving tanks with light armor, with huge damage potential, then it's for you. But the others are really quite hard to play for the average player, even veteran players, because of how many weaknesses they have. They are okay against people who are clueless, because if they just randomly shoot into you, you're quite tough. But the way the tank are so big, they are really big. They're easy to shoot, so they have a lot of weaknesses. So they are hard to progress through. They're not a bad tank, like necessarily. They do have good guns, so you can get good experience points. But if anyone looks at you, you're pretty much guaranteed to die. Down the light route is also hilarious, because the light route starts off with the Hotchkiss 35, which is pretty much the mini cheese. It's slow but tough with a reasonable gun. Then you have the AMX 38, which is slow but tough with a poor gun. The AMX 40, which is super slow, tough with a weak gun. Now, these are incredibly hard to play because you just don't get into the battle in time. By the time you get in the battle, all the guys that you could have hurt are dead, unless you are top tier. So these are an absolute pain to get through as well. But again, not a bad tank for their tier group, but if they go above it, even just one tier against tier 5s, they are bloody useless. And they're so slow, it's hard to get any experience points with them. It's just hard. They're not by any means impossible, and it might suit you down to a T and you get really good results for them. But they are just be warned, they're not so easy. The French, though, get better. Then you get the ELC, and the ELC is a unique beast, okay? This is the reason I haven't mentioned it. The autoloader starts here. The slow but tough tanks end here. But the ELC is so different. It's a freaking ninja. It's super high damage, super high speed, but a lot of weaknesses. It doesn't turn left or right. It goes fast in a straight line. It has a gun that can hurt even tier 10s. It can even hurt the mouse if you know where you're shooting. In a tier 5, what? It has 400 HP, so it can be one-shotted by almost anything. And it has really good camo value because it's tiny. And before the physics, it used to be frickin' OP because you just go next to an IS-3 and the IS-3 can't do anything because it can't look down enough and you just keep shooting it and it's dead as long as it's on its own. So the ELC is really good for if you like being a sniper, sitting on a hill, shooting away. It's great. If you like sitting in a bush and sniping people or zooming across the land, shooting someone at point-blank range and then running off again and just being annoying, it's a great tank. And it's really fun because you're really low and it makes you feel like you're in the Batmobile. You're just like, no, 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 ELC! No, 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 ELC! It's really good. And I find it's really good fun. If you've watched the show, Company Tuesdays, we often take ELC platoons or companies because they're just so much fun. If they're not that effective for you, it's because it is actually a hard tank to play. Unless you sit back and snipe every game, but it doesn't have a full turret, it just has like a TD style arc at the front. But yeah, it's pretty cool. Anyway, when you get up to the top ones, the AMX 5100 and the AMX 1390, you get really good tanks. They're used in professional play a lot. The AMX 1390 has a great reloader. It has a fantastic gun for its tier group, really. The average damage and average penetration is super solid, and it has 6 shells in its chamber. So just multiply that by 6, and you've got how much damage you can do in one go. You can almost one-shot any tank. I say one shot, I mean one cartridge shot. And then you have the AMX 5100, which again, super fast with a great gun. 300 damage, 232 penetration. Again, very, very good. Just 6 shells, you can blow anything to fudge up with that. So if that's your style, then that's your style. It's really, really cool to do that. The French tanks are hard to play. I would say that it's definitely higher skill ceiling than even the German tanks. Sort of. It has a different style. If you can angle your tank well, then the Germans are for you. If you're not really into angling, you're just there for dodging, you're really good at situation awareness, you know where the enemies are coming from, you know which street to take to make sure you're not going to get cornered, then the French are for you. Cool. Nice. So other fast tanks are like the French. So if you like the idea of a French tank, but that's a bit too lightly armoured for you, then we can have a look at actually the German tree. Now if you come over here, you have the VK 320 DB. This tank actually is really decent, right? It's good all-rounder. It's fast, it's got a pretty good gun. I mean, the penetration is not the best, but it's tier 7. It's not too bad, and the gold shot does make it viable. The damage is good, and the rate of fire is pretty damn solid. It's a fast tank. I wouldn't say it's the same style as the French tanks, but it's very much you don't get looked at. Don't try not to get looked at, go around the corner, shoot them, and back off again. Very similar style, but not quite the same. And this is the same as the med tanks. If you like that style and you want to progress away from the completely defenseless if you're shot, then you might want to go down the Russian med tree. I want to see, are you looking at me or are you looking at the tech tree? Cool. Tech tree. You can see the the Russian med tree. Now these are the same sort of style. You pop out, take a couple of shots, you back out again. You pop out, take a couple of shots, and back out again. You pop out, take a couple of shots, you back out again. But you can still take a few shots. And this is the same, almost, as the American meds. So you pop out, you take a couple of shots, you back off again. It's the same style. So if you want to experiment with that sort of style, then med tanks are for you. Go in there, take a few shots, and I'm excluding the German line. This is just USSR and USA. I'll explain the German ones in a minute. So you go out, you take a couple of shots, you back off again. You go up with your heavies, you go around the corner of them, take a couple of shots, back off again. You make sure you're not the center of attention, but you can take a couple of hits so they're not so punished. If you're in a French tank, you can be punished. If someone sees you and they hit you, you're dead. In these tanks, if they see you and hit you, you've got a couple of hits before you're dead. So it's a much more solid choice if you're not quite sure you want to go all the way to the high skill ceiling of the French tanks. Now the German tree. Okay. Germans are known as snipers. Germans are known as snipers for a reason. In World War II, they obviously had very advanced weaponry, and they used it at range. So they've kind of got that in this game, but the game engine has limitations, which really amplify in the German tree. You don't really get that range advantage. You can't really snipe. But at range, if you know how to angle your tank and get the most out of your armor, which again we covered in another Newbie Monday, you can get a lot out of them. They have a lot of good plating for that style of play. The medium tanks are no exception, but they stay out of trouble completely. And you come here and you see tanks like the Panther. Now the Panther II has some crazy guns. Now is this the right one? Let's have a look at all the guns here. They have a lot of guns for the Panther. Okay, see here, penetration, nearly 200. See here, penetration over 200. Rate of fire, really high. Low damage. Accuracy, damn solid. 0.3 is almost the best in the bloody game. Seriously, it's so good at sniping. It's actually known as like the sniper's like tank. So the Panther route is actually really good for being really mobile, getting into position and snipe, 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 move, get in position, snipe, 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 and that's quite similar to a lot of the German styles. It's not perfect. Remember, take all of this advice as a pinch of salt. There are always exception tanks. Not all of them play the same. They all play slightly differently, but this is a general blanket rule. It's not good only on paper. It is actually pretty good. It's not necessarily the best gun, but it's damn solid for what it's meant to be. Learn to aim. Right. The other style of sniping, and when I say sniping, this doesn't mean sitting back in your base and waiting for your team to die and then go, noob team, I was 1 versus 5 in our base, you all died and I'm alive. No, sniping means getting into position where you have maximum advantage over your opponents, you can get enough shells into them that they take damage and your team doesn't. That's sniping. You stay at the back, you stay safe, but you still can see the enemy. And I'll go through this in part 3 when we talk about TDs and artillery. Ah, hell yeah!